Alright, to build this orc vehicle, first I filed down the parts that needed to be glued together just to help them stick together easier. If you do this, it'll basically, it takes a little bit of the plastic and gets it all roughed up on there so that the glue can stick in and stick the stuff together better. So that's usually the first thing I do with anything like this, is start filing the parts that need to get glued together so that they glue, especially with resin and stuff like that. It helps a lot with it sticking together real good. If you do that, usually it definitely ain't coming apart. So I highly recommend getting a little file set or something like that. I have 3 file sets I've bought over time just because I use them so much. Highly recommend files. Very good. Next, I took the tracks and did the same thing. I filed the side that needed to be glued to the frame and then got those stuck down. Always make sure to keep a little pressure on it for a few minutes just to make sure the parts will adhere to each other really well and you don't have to worry about anything breaking apart later. Alright, at this point I'm going to go ahead and just put everything together here. It's not going to be glued. It's also, I printed this FDM base with FDM printer. And that's usually how I make my bases, because those bases made in resin tend to be a little bit prone to cracking. So I usually make mine out of FDM. It just seems to be a better thing to make your bases out of. Alright, now it's time to airbrush. I'm going to start with a little bit of black just to get the frame painted. And I took it back apart as far as everything that wasn't glued together, just to do pieces separate, because a couple of the pieces I'm going to do in red and I want to paint those white, so I don't want to prime them black, because it'll be a lot easier to put the red over the white and make it look really good than putting the red over the black. So I just slowly start going around the model, getting some paint on it. Usually you want to start light, especially with resin, because it seems like it wants to pool really quick sometimes. So I'll try to put a very light coat on first, just all over the model, and let that sit for a second. I'll usually start a few other pieces. Also, if I ever have anything just laying around that needs, what I'm doing right now with that is a good way to clear your airbrush if it's having any clog issues. You just put your finger over the tip and just run the air. It'll cause bubbles to bubble up inside of it, which helps clear out some of the stuff that might be clogging it, and then you can usually get it going again. Now next, I wanted to paint these, like I said, red. I've already primed it white. Now this is it's like a candy coat for model cars. I found, or have had for a while actually, since I got my airbrush. I haven't really used it, so I decided to use it on this. I figured it would give it a really good color. Also, I found that ball red from the Games Workshop line is very similar to this. I used it to touch up a lot of spots, so it's pretty much a one-for-one for this color if you don't have it. I got it at Hobby Lobby, the color, in case you're wondering at where you could find it. Again, just slowly go around the model, building up the color with the airbrush. You don't want it to pull too much. You want it, to be a nice, smooth, even looking cover, and you can usually achieve that pretty easily with the airbrush as long as you're patient and take your time with it. Okay, so I used some Vallejo silver to go over the frame. I did do a zenithal highlight on the frame and the extra little parts, just to help with the shading in the long run. It definitely helps doing a zenithal, I think, to get some of the darker shades on the bottom to look good. Now when you do spray this, again, always when I'm airbrushing, I like to go around certain areas first, real slow, just getting a little bit on there, and while that dries, I will switch to other pieces of the model so that it has plenty of time to start drying and setting. Just do nice little swirl motions. As you can see, that part is not glued on yet. It's just sitting in there. But I just, Usually when certain things like that especially, I know it's going to be covering up a lot of the models, so you don't want to paint all that part because you're going to be gluing that part together anyway. So it'll help with that too. So to get started on painting this, I use some Scab and Blight Dinge. I like to use this on tires. It's a pretty good base for tires, I think. It looks good for painting them, definitely. So I'll put a little bit of that on here, and then we can get to the next step. Next, I'm going to be using a little bit of Nollan oil to darken up and shade the metal bits. I'll start with these inside of the rims, getting those little holes really good. Make sure to work your Nollan oil definitely around all the little parts and bits, especially like anything that's going to be really dark, like these holes here out of this. And then you want to go around these piston heads and things like that, just to make sure you get plenty of detail pulled out of that stuff. Next, I used a little hash nut copper, like this piece here. Just put a little bit of stuff on the tip there, just to make it look a little different, so it isn't all just silver. Like here, put some on the hosing going from the gas cans. Don't forget to put your stuff down after you get a good first coat on, and just move around to do some other things while that's happening. Now we're going to do some Agrex Earthshade. And with the Agrex Earthshade, you're just going to want to smear this all over the metal bits, especially anywhere that would be particularly dirty looking from dirt and the tracks and things like that. So you're just going to move around the model and just keep putting it on there. It's going to take a minute because it's a lot of area to cover, but once you get through all that, you'll be a big part of the way through the model. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you like this kind of content. Alright, next you'll want to start putting some Macragge blue in. Now this is if you're going to do death skulls. If you were going to do something else, you might want to do black and white, maybe if you were going to do golfs. Or if you're just doing evil sons, you could probably do like maybe an orange or something like that in here, and white or something weird, I don't know. But you could do a lot of different things with this part. Just get it covered really good with the Macragge blue. Next, I covered any area with checkers, and this is one of the other area with checkers on it. I think it's the only one. I also used Leviathan blue just to make sure it was really dark blue. Next, I took some super glue to glue her down and put that on some cork because I wanted to give it like an up, just a jacked up look. After I positioned the pieces to be where the tires will be when I go to glue it down, I used some wood glue. I poured a big old dollop on there, and then I'll use a popsicle stick to spread it all around real good and get it everywhere it needs to be on the base. All you really have to do here is just make sure you get a good amount everywhere and make sure it's pretty even. Next, I'll use Coca Core. This is my favorite thing to base with. I'll just break it up off of a brick. You can get 3 bricks for like 10-15 bucks and they will last you forever. I'm still working on my second brick, so I'm surprised I actually went through a whole brick already, honestly. It's definitely worth getting. I love the way it soaks up everything, so it's really good for doing this kind of stuff. And basically here I just smoothed it all out real good. I always push it down into it so that it can get stuck to it really good. You're going to lose a layer on top probably a little bit. I also have another trick for that. I'll use an alcohol spray bottle and just spray some alcohol on it, and that helps to make it all stick together and adhere better. You'll still lose some of it, but it definitely helps with that. Next, we'll
stick the car frame down into it and make sure it adheres to it really well. Next, I took some Calidor Sky and started working that into the checkers that were recessed. So I left the edges dark, to help with the highlighting in the long run. Next, I used Uthern Gray for the skull on the hood. This is a Games Workshop part from a Dreadnought, I believe. And I also used that on the white checkers and the netting. Now, for these, I started with this. I changed this up a little bit later. But I did start with just some, I believe this was Rune Lord Brass. And I use Aberlin Sunset here to paint the tanks on the vehicle. I figured this would give it some nice color, and diesel cans are usually yellow, so that makes it look like it's a diesel engine and stuff, which is kind of neat. Any big engine like this probably would be, so that's kind of cool. And I also used some Uriel yellow to highlight this. Now later I changed it up a little bit by using typhoid corrosion on the bars and stuff, and Rise of Rust to make them look a little more rusty looking, like they'd been, just an old rusty cage from getting dirt and stuff spit up on them from driving around all over the place. I did the same thing with a lot of other parts on it, like that are around anywhere around the tracks, or around especially the frame around the edge of the tracks and things like that, just to give it a more realistic look as far as where it would be weathered at, more than likely from so much use driving around on the battlefield. Here's the Uriel yellow. You could also go on and do a little maybe mix of Uriel and Dorn yellow to get it even a sharper highlight or edge highlight. I didn't end up doing that, but I might do it later. A lot of times I go back into my models. I put 3 days of work on and off into this, basically on and off over 3 days. So definitely plenty of work went into it. I also used hash nut copper on those hoses that are going down into the cans. Okay. Now Eschen Gray I used for the mud flaps on the back. I also ended up highlighting those by just using a little bit of a lighter color, like just lightened it up with something a little lighter than it was, just to highlight them and do some edge highlights on them, maybe like a Mechanicus gray or something like that. Would work great for this. And then I used, again, I always usually use Uthern Gray to start with when I start anything white, because that way it's a darker white. It's more of a gray, like it says. That way you can highlight it and you can go whiter, which is where the only way you want really almost all white is on maybe a highlighted edge of something that is white. You usually don't want too much actual all white on anything. Now I used some of my skulls boxes. I just found this little guy here. It looked cool. It's got that, skull in the desert look. So I figured I'd stick that on there just to give it a little extra flair. I scratched the bottom of this thing up real good and glued it down so the guy's in there. Next, I started working on the highlights and just basically bringing up the color. Now I use Llama Medium for this too, when I mix it in, I'll go from basically the Wild Rider Red. I go through the colors in a little bit here, but I always usually use Llama Medium, mix them together, and this is kind of something you got to get a feel for with the Llama Medium. But the colors are right here. I used Evil Sun Scarlet, Wild Rider Red, and Azeroth Red. And that's just a dry brush. And I didn't actually use it as a dry brush though. I wetted it up a little bit and just mixed it in to just give it a little extra. And I go around slowly, putting a very, very thin layer mixed with the Llama Medium of whatever color I'm bringing it up to. So you start with the darker color, obviously, and then just slowly go lighter with it, less and less as you keep applying coats. And this takes quite a bit of time. This will probably be where you spend most of your time on these paint jobs, is doing this kind of thing. If you really want it to look good, this is how you're going to get the best look in the long run, is by doing this kind of work. And it took me a while to learn how to do this, but it just kind of comes naturally after a while. Once you start doing it, you'll just kind of know where to put it. And that's why I'm leaving all this in here, so you can kind of see where I'm applying it to all the raised areas. I also put as you saw there, a magnet underneath this top piece before I glued it on. And then this way I can put those rockets on the top and let them be able to be taken off or put on. It just makes it a lot easier to deal with that. In between that, I'll work on other things. So next, I worked on the base. Now, that big thing of earth brown you can get, and that's great for basing. I don't use Games Workshop paints for basing because, well, I use some for highlighting, but not for the whole base. I mix it heavily with water, and then I use it, and I almost use that too as a way to, the last thing that helps stick everything down onto the base. Like the paint will act as a blinding agent at the end there, basically, and help everything to stay adhered to the base. All the last bit of cocoa coir will soak up into there. You'll probably get a bunch of little pieces of cocoa coir on your brush. You just wipe them off on the edge somewhere. You'll want to use an old brush for this. I never use, hardly ever, any kind of expensive brushes. I always use really cheap Walmart or anywhere else brushes I can find that hardly cost anything. And I've ordered like 50 very tiny brushes for just little quick detail things that I can use up. And yeah, you can get them for like 50 of them for $6, and it just seems like the better way. I can't just bring myself to spend $26 on a brush that I know in the long run. I know you can take care of them, and I might eventually do that, but anyway, back to this. Careboard Crimson is what I used to darken the edges of any recesses. So this is another step in the whole highlighting process. Again, as that other stuff dried, then I did this to start putting some more definition into it. And then I'll go back over this stuff again with the Llama Medium and other colors, and then that'll start to blend that all in together really well. And that's just the way I went to do that. Now the Bane Bay Brown is something this is a new color I've started using a lot lately for basing. I especially like it. It seems to be a good base color that for highlighting your dark terrain, especially brown terrain. It's got a very natural muddy look. I'll take a Q-tip and just put some wood glue on that and start smashing it all over to the areas that I want to put static grass. And again, I'm doing these types of things in between the painting of the hall and other parts, just highlighting and letting that stuff dry as that dries, I can set this stuff up to dry and back and forth. And basically that, helps things go a little quicker. So you ain't just sitting around waiting for stuff to dry. You can be constantly working on something at least. When I do this, I kind of twist it in my fingers a little bit to make sure it gets good and staticky. And then I just start kind of stippling it on there, just smashing it like in a stipple type manner. And that kind of helps to make sure it's sticking more up, instead of laying on its side. It definitely, like its name suggests, it's static grass. So if you do it right, it'll be kind of staticky and it'll stick up and look really good. Just make sure you shake off your excess and don't lose any of it, because you can keep reusing it till it, finally sticks. Some of it ain't going to stick because you're going to use it in excess. And if you see any areas that need more, just start smashing a little more in there and then brush it off. Okay, now I usually just go around the base, like I'm trying to make it look like the tires kind of ran over the grass and destroyed wherever. So I'm not going to put grass anywhere where the tracks would have been, and I'm just going to put grass where around the edges and stuff, so it looks like the tracks tore through there and at least tore up the ground around where the tracks would have went through, so there wouldn't be any grass left hardly. Just kind of giving it a little more realistic look maybe, or just trying to give it some flavor. That's why I put a bunch down the edge of this side of this track, just to make it look like that grass was all fine because the tracks didn't come through there and destroy it. Just keep doing the same thing around the base, wherever you want. Really, it's no wrong way to do this. It's just more of a feel. I put a little in front of the tracks to show they are going through there and destroying the grass. Also, I don't think I ever said, with the metal parts on this, I did start them with that base that I sprayed them with, but later I took some Gray Knight steel. I really like that as a base, especially for these, because it's kind of got a bluish tint, and since I'm doing death skulls, it kind of, just those colors complement each other really well with the blue of the checkers and stuff. So next I decided to do something a little different with Corvus Black and Dark Reaper to the tires, because again, tires aren't exactly black. They're more of a blue black. And again, the blue black gives also more, it ties the model together better visually. Just trying to keep colors in the same spectrum will help a lot with making the model look good. And I use Dark Reaper and Dawnstone mix for highlighting the tires, and this gives them a really good rugged look, like they've been a little bit worn and beat up. So that's what I ended up doing with the tires. I think it gave them a little bit better of a look. I also went around the edges of each of those tire treads with just some straight Dawnstone in the end, just to give it a nice sharp edge on those. And they ended up, I like the way they came out. I feel like they came out pretty good. I also used a few grass tufts on the base here and there, just to break it up, to make it look a little different, so it isn't all exactly the same looking grass. That can help a lot with making it look more real. The White Scar, Dorn Yellow, Uriel Yellow, Troll Slayer Orange, Troll Slayer Orange, Evil Sun Scarlet, and then just Evil Sun Scarlet. Now that's my recipe for fire. Alright, so on this, I just wet blended those colors, starting from the lightest to darkest, going from the back end of the rocket to the smoke. And with the smoke, I just used varying shades of gray down to a very light Uthern gray. Also, I glued down that back gun. That little gun there I just pulled up, for the cannon. You have to do that a little bit shorter, the paint job, as far as the fire goes. And I also wanted to just show off a little closer the rust effects I did on this. If you like this, like and subscribe. God bless you, and thank you for watching.